This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their export.
Canada is rebalancing where it buys and sells. After months of tariff drama and tense headlines, Canada has started doing a little less trade with the United States and a little more with other countries. Government data shows that Canada's export share going to the US has dropped to around 68% by mid-2025, which is the lowest on record. That's still a huge amount, but it's a clear sign that Canada is diversifying its trade. The country is leaning more on existing trade pacts like CPTPP, which connects it with 10 Indo-Pacific nations, and CETA with Europe, while exploring new ties with South America through Mercosur and other regions in Asia. When people say 11 new trade partners, they are mostly referring to Canada's CPTPP partners, plus new entrants like the UK and potential future deals that Ottawa is negotiating. The big picture is simple. Canada is actively widening the list of go-to trade partners beyond the United States. For US brands that have relied on Canada as a steady and easy neighbor market, this is a big deal. If Canadian buyers start getting better deals from Asia, Europe, or Latin America, thanks to tariff advantages, US companies will face stiffer competition on pricing, delivery, and rules of origin. Here's how 7 major American brands could be directly affected. Ford. Canada has always been one of Ford's most important markets outside the US, and the auto industry between the two countries is tightly connected. Vehicle parts often cross the border multiple times before a finished car rolls out. When tariffs rise or trade rules change, the costs and complexity quickly go up. If Canada increases its vehicle imports from CPTPP members like Japan, or starts sourcing more from European automakers, Ford could face price competition and sourcing challenges that cut into its margins. This comes at a time when automakers are already under pressure from the electric vehicle transition, rising production costs, and supply chain issues. If Canadian dealerships find it easier and cheaper to import competitive models from Japan or Europe, Ford will need to adapt by increasing Canadian or CPTPP region content in its vehicles to stay competitive under new trade rules. The brand is strong, but market share pressure and thinner margins are real possibilities if the trade environment stays uncertain. General Motors. General Motors is facing the same challenges as Ford. It depends on a similar cross-border supply chain and sells many of the same types of vehicles in Canada. If Canada continues to source more vehicles or parts from its new trade partners, GM will have to rework its sourcing strategies to keep tariffs low and costs competitive. There's also the added pressure of the electric vehicle market. If Canada boosts incentives for EVs that meet specific content rules favoring CPTPP suppliers, GM will have to move quickly to find new suppliers or adjust production to meet these requirements. Changing supply lines is not quick or easy, and during the adjustment period, Canadian buyers may lean more toward other brands offering better deals. Like Ford, GM won't lose its market entirely, but it may find itself in a prolonged competitive battle. Boeing. In aerospace, deals are huge, long-term, and influenced by politics. Canada has a history of balancing its aerospace purchases between Boeing and other manufacturers like Airbus. If Canada strengthens its trade ties with Europe and Asia, it may lean more toward Airbus or other international players, especially if they can offer better pricing, industrial partnerships, or local production benefits. This doesn't mean Boeing will suddenly lose all Canadian contracts, but it does mean Canadian buyers, both commercial airlines and the government, will have more negotiating power. They may push Boeing for better terms, lower prices, or more local investment in Canadian aerospace facilities. For Boeing, that could mean winning deals at lower margins, especially if Canada's diversification strategy encourages spreading contracts more evenly among global suppliers. Apple. Apple has a strong brand presence in Canada, but its products are premium priced. Tariffs, currency changes, and increased competition from electronics brands in CPTPP countries could put pressure on Apple's sales, especially in mid-range devices. If Canadian consumers can access high-quality phones, laptops, or tablets from other trade partners at lower prices, Apple could face slower upgrade cycles and fewer impulse purchases. This doesn't mean Canadians will suddenly stop buying iPhones or Macs. However, they may hold on to devices longer or consider alternatives if cost of living pressures remain high. Apple can respond by adjusting pricing, offering more competitive trade-in programs, or boosting its local service offerings. The brand's core following is strong, but price sensitivity will be a bigger factor if tariffs keep raising costs for US-made devices. Walmart. Walmart's promise in Canada has always been everyday low prices, but tariffs and shifting sourcing rules make that harder to deliver. While Walmart is a global leader in supply chain management and can adapt to new trade routes, any transition takes time. Sourcing more goods from CPTPP partners might be a solution, but it could still cause short-term cost increases or product shortages in some categories. Canadian shoppers are already adjusting their buying habits due to inflation and economic uncertainty. Some are shifting to more local brands, while others may choose products imported from CPTPP countries if they're cheaper. Walmart's challenge will be to keep prices competitive without losing profit margins, especially in key categories like groceries, household goods, and apparel. Starbucks. Starbucks is known for selling more than coffee. It sells an experience, but that experience comes at a cost, and tariffs can affect everything from coffee beans to paper cups. If certain inputs sourced from the US become more expensive in Canada, local coffee shops or international chains with diversified supply sources might be able to offer similar products at lower prices. There's also the question of consumer mood. During trade disputes or economic downturns, some people may choose to support Canadian-owned cafes or simply cut back on premium coffee purchases. Starbucks will need to rely on its loyalty programs, seasonal promotions, and unique menu offerings to keep Canadian customers engaged and willing to pay a bit more for the brand experience. Tyson Foods. Agriculture is one of the sectors most quickly affected by tariffs, and Tyson Foods could be in the direct line of fire. If Canada increases its meat imports from CPTPP partners or other nations with new trade agreements, Tyson could face increased competition in pricing and supply. Since food is highly price sensitive, even small differences in cost can sway buyers. Canada's supply management system and shifting import quotas can also make the playing field unpredictable. If trade politics continue to influence agricultural imports, Canadian buyers might rely more heavily on Latin American or Indo-Pacific suppliers to keep supermarket prices stable. Tyson will have to compete on both quality and price while navigating a more complex set of import rules. Whether you count 10, 11, or more trade partners, the point is the same. Canada now has multiple options for sourcing goods and services beyond the US CPTPP alone, connects it to 10 Indo-Pacific countries, while agreements with Europe and potential deals with South America give it even more flexibility. When tariffs or politics make buying from the US more expensive, Canada can quickly turn to these alternative partners. It's unlikely that Canada will ever completely move away from US trade. The two countries are still each other's largest and most important trading partners, and geography, infrastructure, and shared standards make that hard to change. However, the shift toward diversification is real and will likely remain in place to some degree. Even a modest rebalancing can have long-term effects on US brands that once relied on easy tariff-free access to Canadian customers. A reduction or removal of tariffs would make a huge difference. If Washington and Ottawa ease trade tensions, costs for many products could drop quickly. US companies could also reduce the pressure by sourcing more materials or production from Canada or CPTPP countries to meet rules of origin requirements and keep tariffs low. Finally, stable currency exchange rates and lower inflation would give brands more flexibility to price competitively without sacrificing profit margins. In the short term, the change is a challenging headwind for the 7 brands discussed. They will face tighter margins, more competition, and customers who are more sensitive to price. In the medium term, if tariffs stay in place and Canada continues to open doors to new trade partners, the competition will become part of the new normal. Over the long run, the US will still be a major player in Canadian trade, but companies will need to adapt to a world where Canada has multiple options. Ford and GM will likely face sourcing and margin pressures. Boeing will have to negotiate harder for contracts. Apple may see more competition in mid-tier products. Walmart will deal with near-term supply chain adjustments. Starbucks will need to defend its value proposition. And Tyson Foods will have to compete in a sector that reacts quickly to trade changes. The message from Canada is clear. It wants more partners and more resilience. For US brands, the response should be just as clear. Adapt your sourcing, make smart use of trade rules, and focus on giving Canadian customers strong value. That's the best way to turn a challenge into an opportunity.